Bonjour and welcome to Hoda's Career Info. I am your host, Hoda, and this is the channel for everyone seeking career knowledge. It is my pleasure to interview Mike Bird, aka Coach Oiseau. Mike is the founder of Coach Oiseau Career Coaching and an iPEC-trained certified professional coach. Mike prides himself on his ability to help university students to confidently launch their careers. Clients who work with Mike figure out their next move, brand themselves as ideal candidates, and land their first real job faster. Let's hear what Coach Oiseau has to say about career coaching. Welcome, Mike Bird. It's a pleasure to have you join me today to talk about your work, but also to congratulate you on having the Career Builders podcast make it to the top career podcast guide of 2021. It's really exciting times for sure.
Thank you so much, Hoda. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I appreciate you bringing that up. It's a real, honestly, still a bit of a shock, still a bit of a surprise that it's even happened, but I'm so appreciative.
And I will be talking to you more about it and ask you more about it in a bit. But first, I want to ask you about Coach Oiseau Career Coaching. You know that I love that name. And do you mind sharing with the audience some more details about the name of your company and your reason for founding it?
Sure. It is a name that's really a derivative of my own identity and my life experience. And I live in Montreal, Quebec, which is a pretty French-speaking city. There's a pretty large contingency of people like me who speak English. But I did not grow up in this kind of an environment. I'm from English-speaking Canada. I grew up in an English family. And it was really when I met someone as a teenager, one of the first coaches that entered my life actually was a Francophone from sort of the Ottawa-Gatineau area, very French-speaking area typically. And that really was the first time that the idea of being called something in French came around. So Oiseau really comes from a long way back when I became a student here in Montreal when I was about 17. That's when I decided I would start to bring that back into the fold. I mean, fast forward many years later, Coach Oiseau has been a social media handle for me. It's been a blog handle for me. And now it's really the basis of my brand as a business owner. And it's interesting because sometimes I wonder if it's a little bit too much about me. I always, you want a business to really resonate with the people who are going to be clients in it. But I've also really realized that it's quite different, quite unique. And I'll lean into that, even though sometimes people don't always see the French English connection to my last name, Bird. That's okay.
Definitely a unique brand. Coach Oiseau is from how I think of you. So it's definitely unique. And I'll always remember you. Like if I forget your name, Coach Oiseau will kind of lead me to your name if I do a Google search. So
perfect. Yeah. Exactly.
Part of the series is to try to identify key terms within the career industry and find definitions for them. And for you, we chose the definition for career coaching. So how do you, Coach Oiseau, define career coaching?
Yeah, I think I would start by kind of looking at the definition of coaching just in a broader sense, being coming from a place where you're working with someone in partnership to see blind spots that they cannot see for themselves, whether it's a client or, because I come from an athletic background originally, whether it's an athlete who wants to reach a certain goal, and you see people who are in the Olympic Games, for example, or who compete on the world stage in a sport. They have been surrounded by coaches throughout their entire lives in many cases. And it's about being there as a support for them in their journey. It's, like I said, about seeing blind spots, seeing the things that you can't see. And we all have blind spots, including us as coaches. And it's also about paving the way. It's about previewing what is to come, because I believe that preparation precedes success. And so the more that we can do as coaches to prepare people, and in this case, let's go to the context of career coaching, it means preparing people to represent themselves in sometimes the written format, resume, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, just having an online presence in the world today. It can also mean preparation around an interview and how do we sell ourselves in either a Zoom setting or an in-person setting. And I know that that's changed quite a lot over the last couple of years with the pandemic and also just the improvement in technology. And can we prepare ourselves for what happens when we do actually get a job offer? Because I think a lot of people kind of get to that moment when it does arrive and they're super happy and they're excited, and they sort of also freeze sometimes, and they don't necessarily take advantage of what can come around in that moment. So every step of the way is a little bit different. I mean, before all of that, sometimes it means helping someone explore what their next steps might be. I shouldn't miss that. That's really kind of the beginning of any career transition in my eyes. But just being there for the long run and in partnership with our clients, that's what career coaching is for me.
Thank you. And I like how you added the exploration part, because really it's this, and we think of it as a journey as career coaches for sure. I would like to take you next to the free resources that you offer on your website. So they are available online on your website. So if you talk a little bit about them in general, but in particular, and of course, we need to talk about the podcast, the Career Builders podcast, and the prestigious position it is right now. Can you focus a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So the podcast it's a free resource that continues to evolve every week. There's something that's added to it, and that's part of what's so fun for me to produce it, and also for those who are looking for something that it's not something that you just download and you read and you store away. We have something that you can come back to all of the time. The podcast we bill it as a show that is for people who are in their 20s and 30s, who are serious about their careers, but not necessarily too serious about themselves. And that's important. That's a reflection of my personality and Lisa, my podcast co-host's personality as well. And we're really looking to explore the different things that could happen for someone who is developing their career, not just from a job seeker's standpoint, or the perspective of someone who is maybe unemployed or is just looking to transition, but also from the standpoint of someone who is in a job and is in a career that they love right now. And it's about how do they maximize the opportunity that they're in and just really have greater agency over their professional lives. Because I think once we feel that way, the rest of our lives have the ability to transform as well. So that's really the root of the show. We get to speak with some great people, some of whom come from the career coaching space and others who are not career development professionals. And that's also a lot of fun. People who are more industry professionals, possibly CEOs or entrepreneurs, authors of books, just people who have really interesting perspectives on some different topics that are relevant to that kind of audience. And my audience falls in that 20 to 30 something range most of the time, as does Lisa's. So it works out really well for both of us. Yeah, that's how I would start on the Career Builders podcast.
Well, congratulations again. One of the purpose of this series is really to talk about the value of the work we do as career coaches, and you have already, highlighted that a little bit. But one of the questions that I get, that with all the free career resources available that we as career coaches provide online for free, from free assessments to YouTube videos, podcasts, and so on, why would a client need or really seek your service and my service as a career coach? It's all available online for free.
Mm-hmm. You're right. There's a ton of content out there. You can get resume templates. You can get interview guides. I mean, it is amazing. And it's been great to see sort of the diverse range of content that is out there for people who are in different parts of a career transition. But I think that's kind of also alluding to at the same time where the role of a coach comes in. Everyone's situation is so unique and is so different. And I mean, I can maybe liken this a little bit to back in the fall. I bought my first house with my partner, and we went through a process with our real estate agent that looked at, what did we really want? What did we want at that time? What do we want to be living in? Where do we want to be living in? How could we possibly get into something like that? What would it look like? And that's the depth of that, and the customized approach to working with someone is what's missing from the free resource experience, which is fine. It's for the people who might not yet be ready to go out and hire someone to come in as a coach. But that's where coaching really, I mean, you don't see someone using free guides to get themselves into the Olympics in the sport that they play. So at some point, the really hands-on part of working with a coach is valuable. But then there's also the psychological side of things, in terms of just, I can speak from my experience of hiring a business coach. The confidence that you have in what you're doing all of a sudden changes almost overnight, really. And knowing that you have someone who has possibly done what you're trying to do before, or at least can give really, really tailored insight into how you can go after what you want. And sometimes just a coach helps you clarify what you want. But without that, I think a lot of people can sometimes go from one free resource to another, and there's no real direction in their action. And so the coach brings everything in line, puts it into a strategy where there's an objective. I want to go after job X. How can we do that? Okay, here's a way, here's an approach, here's some tactics that we can apply. And that's where we go from having a situation where there's sort of 1,000 steps taken in 1,000 directions to 1,000 steps taken toward one direction. And that's when real progress gets realized.
I totally agree with you on that. Yes. And I think you also mentioned in the beginning that you also bring a unique perspective that they may have missed out, these blind spots as well. So definitely, what we bring is that ability to put it all together and make our clients happier in moving forward. With that in mind, can you tell the audience your ideal client and the services that you offer that client? You mentioned their 20s to 30s, but can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, I've been positioned for some time now in sort of the new grad market, where people who maybe had a year left in school were coming out and had no idea really what they were going to do after school, or maybe they'd been out of school for a little bit in the working world for a couple of years, and maybe they were in a situation where they felt like, oh, after all of that schooling, maybe I'm not in the right career for me and I want to make a change. And what's happened over the last several months is I get a little bit of that. I get a little bit of the person who's trying to break in and start in their career, but I'm getting more and more of the person who is a little bit further along or may have done a master's degree and maybe a little bit older. And so it's working. It's still working in terms of helping people establish their careers early on or going from advanced education into the working world. So it's someone who is in that transition, and they could be in their early 20s, but I'm also now working with people who are in their early 30s, and it all depends. I mean, the principles of career development and career transition, career literacy, I know is the term that you love to put on a lot of these things that we're talking about now. They apply in a very universal way regardless of where a person is. But it is, like we said, about going back and tailoring the exact things that we're doing for that particular client. So that's who they are. They're oftentimes they're very energetic, they're very enthusiastic, but they often kind of lack the sense of what the value that they bring to the table could be, and how they can communicate that. They're not always seeing the hiring process from the side of an employer, and usually once that light gets turned on, there's a pretty dramatic shift in things like messaging and interview performance when you know what's in it for the other side. So that's who my ideal client is. They're just awesome to work with. I've enjoyed working with young people throughout my whole life, and that's why I still do it. Energizes me, really.
Yeah, well, same here. The feeling, I share the same feeling. That's why I prefer the younger adults passion and getting out that passion from them and helping them move forward. Can you tell us about a service or two that you offer? Do you have packages, or do you go like some coaches offer hourly support?
Yeah, so I package in a one-on-one context based off of where the client is in their transition, and the closer they are to having a clear target that they're trying to achieve in terms of a target role, the less time it usually takes for me to help them get to their end goal, versus someone who is starting further back and maybe has no idea what they want to do, or maybe they're between 3 or 4 different options. It's about how do we explore those options and narrow things down, because without a narrower focus, I can't really help a person get to the end line. It's pretty important. So I price based off of where that is, where the client is in that transition cycle. On the flip side of one-on-one, so there's also a small group. I call it a challenge. It's not really a coaching package, but it's a 15-day challenge where I get to bring people into a very it's a programmed set of calls and steps and resources that are presented. And that's meant to be super affordable. It's a chance for people to experience what it's like to work with me. Uh, they will get something that's very concrete at the end of it. I don't have to kind of speak in vague terms at all around that. And what I'm working on right now, Hoda, that I'm hoping to get out in Q2 of this year, if I can, is a subscription-based group coaching program for those who maybe they just need a couple of months of help until they land, or they've found themselves in a transition that's taking longer and they'd like to speed things up. And so it's sort of a service that they could go to until they're hired and they no longer need the help of a coach, and they can step out of that. That would be a larger group program for those who need it.
I love the idea of that program, because I do get what I do offer is after I finish, if I work with a client for a year, I give a package of mentoring, like just come back and check with me. And but yours is like helping them through that transition, a bit more than mentoring, and a level where you're available for them to support them, I guess. So that would be nice to have, and I wish you best of luck with that. One more question. I've got one more question for you, and that is about how we as career coaches, we encourage the clients to have a plan 5 to 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. And I loved today how you talked about the realtor who told you, what kind of house you want and how long you want to live in it, right? And so what are some of the ideas going on through your mind for the future? I was glad to hear about that program, because that's also in the future, but it's a closer future. But how about 5 to 10 years from now? What would you like to be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I could see in 5 years this being a solopreneur business that is probably supported a little bit through some outsourcing. For example, I'll still be continuing to release podcast episodes, and maybe I'll have another podcast at that point that may be a solo show with just me and whomever would like to join me as a conversational guest for that. Because I do just love podcasting, and I think I can help people through that medium in particular. So it probably has some more group scaled components to it, because the young person who might not be the actual economic client in the engagement, I want to provide something where people can pay something that is affordable and within reach, versus just possibly going after those that have the financial resources to pay for a one-on-one coach. There's a pretty big difference sometimes between how you can help someone who has those financial resources versus someone who doesn't. I'm not sure if I explained that very clearly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but also not just for financial. Like, I get a lot of young people whose parents want them to think about it. They want to think about it, but they don't want to deal with anyone right now. Like, they want to listen and learn before moving forward. So I think I get what you're trying to say, in that financial reason is definitely a cost, but there are other reasons really for seeking that kind of service.
Absolutely. Yeah. So ensuring that the people who really want coaching can access it in some way is sort of a 5-year goal, which means having different offerings that really feed into that. And I think that honestly, in the long term, coaching is probably one part of a larger business. And it might be a business that expands out into leadership development. It might expand into coaching for people who are in the workplace already, right? They've established their careers, and maybe it's about going from the entry level to middle management, or from middle management to the C-suite, and being really along for a longer term ride with the people that I started working with. If we're looking 10 years ahead and looking back at the people that I've helped over that period of time, how can I continue to add value to those people? And so that's probably more than just me who's involved in the business at that point. And it would be really neat to run an organization that is focused on a lot of the values that I've talked about today, has a lot of those perspectives, but has the ability to reach more and more people.
I like that. I like the idea of continuing with the clients, because I'm always curious of what happened to this client who started in this program. Did we make the right choices for them? And then it's nice to catch up every now and then. So, and then to be able to see them, how they're continuing the road down their journey. So this is a great idea. So these are all the questions I had for you today, Mike. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or something that you'd like to wrap up with our conversation today?
Sure. I guess it's been a great conversation, and I've really appreciated your questions, Hoda. I think for anyone who is listening, I'm really open to speaking with other career development professionals like you. I love just having a call with someone who maybe I cross paths with on LinkedIn. And that's kind of how you and I have met and facilitated through another career development friend. So I'm just a big fan of paying that forward. If you're listening to this, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message and say that you heard this show, and I'd be more than happy to get on a call or a Zoom with you, because I think that our community is, as kind of we're demonstrating right now, really is super strong. It's super supportive. It's a lot of fun and energizing to be a part of, and I want to be a contributor and not just a taker.
Thank you so much, Mike, and I look forward to further collaborations.
Absolutely. Same here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to increase your knowledge about the role of career professionals. Career literacy is so important. And at Hoda's Career Info, my goal is to raise awareness about its value. I hope you enjoyed learning about Mike Bird's work. You can connect with Mike on his website. You guessed it, CoachOiseau.com, or on LinkedIn. Oh, and don't forget to check out the Career Builders podcast. I am your host, Hoda, and until next time, keep moving forward.